very big welcome to Empower Her podcast. So let me introduce our author today, Apoorva Rastogi. She is a product innovator and visionary leader who believes in building with both head and heart. Her career has spanned continents and industries, from factory floors to design studios to corporate boardrooms, always guided by one purpose: to lead with light. She has shaped products and cultures at Apple, Amazon, Google, and the award-winning design firm Fuse Project, where she learned that language is the bridge between creativity and commerce. A very big welcome to Empower Her podcast. Wow. And this is chapter 12, Leading with Light. So let me introduce our author today, Apoorva Rastogi. So without further ado, I would love Apoorva to say hi to you in just a moment, just after we read this first quote. When you lead with light, you don't just build products or companies, you build cultures and guide people. I love that. And here is Apoorva to let us know a little bit more about that. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I'm so honored to be a part of the book and so excited to be able to share the journey and the story. So I just felt that in my career, I've learned so much across the last 16 years, and it's really a great moment to share a lot of that with women all over the world. Um, and just working across all of these Fortune companies, large brands that are global, but also working with startups in Silicon Valley. I've had some unique experiences, and I've met so many different people, 500 people across the world working across time zones. And there's just so much intel and insight in all of these companies and also different cultures. So it's been a fun journey leading across all of these areas. And I've also grown a lot. And I think that there's so much more ahead too. So I'm excited about what's ahead.
Wow. So let's just go right back to the beginning of the book. And of course, if you want to find out more about Apoorva, please grab Empower Her. This is my book that I'm highlighting for our podcast. You start with the spark. And in one of the sections, you've got, I was a 21-year-old Indian immigrant woman working with men that were twice my age, walking the lines with a clipboard and safety glasses, engineering new packaging designs for America's most historical brands. So take us back there. How did it feel and what happened from there?
Yeah, so that was a fun moment in my career. So it was my first job after college, and the economy at that time was not that great. It was 2009 when I graduated, and um, companies had canceled on interviews, our job fairs were canceled. So all of these promises that we had in our major kind of felt like they had dissipated. And so I just kept networking, and I thankfully landed this opportunity in Kansas in the middle of a small town. So it's very different from what I had imagined, which was corporate big city life. And it was very humbling, and it was also very heartwarming to have this experience. And I think it really helped me grow in areas that I needed at that moment in life. So this company was very small. I spoke directly with the CEO, and in our first meeting, he kind of was just asking me questions on what my experience was like at school, and I was there meeting him under the terms of, hey, he's kind of exploring hiring somebody, but not sure. So we just had a very easy flowing conversation, and I was just looking at it as a networking opportunity. And it turned out that the conversation went so well, he offered me a job in that moment. So it was pretty exciting, and there was just so much trust that that person had in me, and it was such a great first career opportunity. but it was also not without its challenges. So I had to learn the industry, kind of how people worked in that environment from the manufacturing areas to the sales team and meeting clients all over the state of Kansas. So I was driving around all over the place with the sales team, meeting customers, learning about what they've been doing, and then creating new designs for their packaging. So it was huge brands that have been in the US, like some of them since the late 18th century. So very iconic historic brands and deep ties to the area and just their industries as well. So I learned a lot really fast, and I was able to just go from the office down to the factory because it was in the same building. So I saw everything firsthand. I could go talk to the operators. I could say, "Hey, I'm designing this, and will it run in your machine?" And they would just kind of make a little sample and we try it. So it was very hands-on, and it was such a great experience to learn that way. But I think it gave me a lot of confidence, and I learned that I actually really enjoyed talking to people more than I did working in CAD. So I quickly moved into management, just springboarding from that first job, and have built, I have built a career in management since then. So 15 years.
Wow, congratulations. I love that from the beginning. And you write here, leadership was not about being the smartest person in the room or even the one with all the ideas. Leadership was about understanding what everyone in the room needed to rally around for the common cause. So, was that something you discovered early on?
Yes. So, um, what I learned, excuse me, especially at that job was that even though I had all these big ideas, coming in fresh into the industry, wanting to change the world and thinking I could do it that instantly, I did learn that some ideas were not practical. So I learned kind of the constraints of not just the machines, but industries and how people function and how businesses function. So I learned that. And I also um, was able to kind of see the like innovation mindset and how to bring that into companies where they have been doing the same thing for a long time. So because these were historical brands, they also had optimized all of their systems down, to the penny of every unit. They knew what was coming from where in terms of their revenues and bill of materials. So there was a lot that would be changed, even with just one minute change in that industry. So I learned where to push and where not to push, and then where to keep the status quo, but where to kind of present ideas and present possibilities and open up
Mm,
people's minds. So in that process, I learned how to respond to people and picked up that that was actually a skill I had. And yeah, I just kind of kept working on that skill. And then through more jobs afterwards, they were all in management. So I learned more and more how to lead people through moments like that or lead people through innovations and how to actually deliver innovations because of that experience too.
wow. You've got from the manufacturing lines of Toyota and Nissan to the product labs of Apple and Amazon. I grew the leadership spark from factory floors to corporate office corridors. You were trusted to direct teams. So tell me, because a lot of people, of course, we all work with people in some form, whether they're our customers, whether they're our teams that become our customers, we hope. Um, what's been the hardest, what's been a time when you felt disempowered and when you felt empowered leading teams?
Hmm, that's a really good question. I think, when it comes to large companies, because they are global, any minute change has a huge impact. It's a ripple effect, right? So I think some moments where I learned those boundaries or where we couldn't actually change the world, so to say, is when we had to make decisions based on those operational impacts. And at the same time, I learned that even though there were constraints, in pricing or in equipment or with global logistics and supply chain or just simply physics of things, I did learn that when we do kind of strip away those constraints, we can create an atmosphere of possibilities. So it's a balance of how do we create an environment where people can dream and think beyond what's in front of them, like, blue sky thinking or zero to
Yeah.
one products. But at the same time, when to layer in those constraints. So I, not that it's necessarily a disempowering moment, but it's more of like a grounding to reality
Yeah. Yeah.
and the terms that we have to work with and the physics and the environment we have on Earth, right? So just knowing, okay, we can't actually manufacture something that fast, or this new design is so beautiful and amazing, but there's no way the company can make 1,000 of those in 30 minutes. So it's things like that that taught me a lot throughout the years. And thankfully, I had the opportunity to travel and go to factory floors and see it, but also bring those experiences into design agencies and into the boardrooms to be able to connect the dots for people. And that's where I have felt so empowered that I had these opportunities firsthand.
Just as you were saying that, I was thinking of De Bono and the six hat thinking. Like I love that and use that with my teams as well. So you're talking about the blue sky thinking. So we can put on those different hats. And if you're not the creative one, if you're not coming up with the solutions, then we don't want your black hatting it yet. We'd like to get all the ideas out before we can put on the black hat and decide where any issues might be, and then put on the yellow hat to see can we overcome any of those obstacles to get to what was the best idea that we could go forward with. And there's so many great models, and it was great that you mentioned that because you took me back, and I'm just about to do something with councils, and I was thinking, you know what, the six hats is going to be brilliant for this.
Great. Yeah,
um,
that's a good analogy.
uh, so yeah, so you speak about words as well. Every
Mhm.
world has its words. That's when I learned that vocabulary is the bridge between credibility and collaboration. I just want to read this little bit. For women in leadership, especially those in male dominated fields, this matters more than we often admit. The more fluent you are in business design, tech, and operations, the more freedom you have to lead authentically and the more respect you earn. Learning the words gives you a seat at the table. Using them wisely lets you change what happens when you're there. That is so smart. So anyone, listening and going into a different business, a different job, learn as much as you can. The product knowledge, everything, the language that they use, because when you are using it, then their ears all of a sudden go, huh? Well, she knows what she's talking about. And you
Exactly.
say vocabulary is the first step, fluency as a language is the second. So I'll let you expand on that.
Yeah, so especially because I am in technical areas, there are a lot of words that come with the subject matter that we're speaking about. So there's a level of understanding in that way, but also in the product sense that you mentioned, there are specific terms, there are specific words, and then working across companies, you see that companies have their own culture and use their own words for things sometimes. So you do kind of adapt, but I think when you start speaking in the terms that are relevant for that audience, that's how you connect with them best because that's the vocabulary they're using every day. So that is how you speak their language, right? And then when you're speaking the language, people are listening, you're communicating, and it's a flow. And then because of that, you can actually build on that and then lead or elevate or make suggestions and start to be more of the team. So it's like if I go to Germany, for example, I'm actually learning German. I think it's a fascinating language for
Yeah.
science and technology. So that's a country where when I go there, I can unlock so much more knowledge if I can speak the language. So, in a similar way, when you enter a company, they have their own terms, and then you can unlock more with the language. So, that's something I learned, especially going across companies like from Amazon to Apple to Google. They have different words for things. So,
Yeah.
in some moments, I noticed that some people would understand, and then sometimes there would be just kind of like a language barrier until you figured out what it was that made
Mm.
sense to them. And then when you got there, it's like that light bulb moment, and then you can move forward. So, yeah, the language is very important. The words are important. And then having that fluency to use them is unlocking those conversations and moving forward that way.
I love that. Thank you for sharing because language is so important. And one of my chapters in the Conscious Leader is the language of leadership. This is part of it, the language of business. If you want career acceleration, you say join an agency. So for those listening that might want to have career acceleration, just let us know a little bit more about that. And of course, pick the book up if you want to go deep.
Yes. So, in my career, especially when I did make it to Silicon Valley, I entered through Apple. So at that moment when I had joined, I was working in an adjacent um, area to the product, and that was an industry in itself, the packaging industry. But when I was in Silicon Valley, it activated the excitement I had for technology. So I learned very quickly that in order to pivot into actually leading the technology, I had to either go back to school and get a different degree, or I had to find a way to bring my adjacent skills into another role and kind of transition into it that way. So at the big companies, though, they were expecting subject matter experts, somebody with deep experience. So I realized, and this is where a bit of that guidance came in my life that I talk about in my chapter. I had this intuition that in order for me to really grow more beyond this role, beyond the capacity I had, I just felt called to step away from the big companies and into an agency. And the advantage of the agency is they have multiple clients, they work across industries, and they work very fast across many different areas of expertise. So that exposure is what helped me gain all of the skills that I have for leading different products of all different kinds. So now it's not just product adjacent terms. I know the terms across electric scooters versus wellness devices versus apps for your skin. So that translates into a whole nother level of experience. And in my industry and in my career, now I can actually market those skills at a whole different level than I could before. And at the agency, I was working across 5 different clients and 14 different products. So it really expanded my scope and knowledge about everything.
Well, there you go. And so for those listening to this podcast, you know, perhaps if you want career acceleration, join an agency. And you say that grounding comes from faith. Faith teaches me patience when decisions are delayed, grace when tempers flare, courage when the path ahead is uncertain. It keeps me steady when the world demands speed. It keeps me charging forward in difficult moments, knowing that we have a path to victory if we just walk forward. At Apple, I learned that design as much, sorry, at Apple, I learned that design is as much about what you leave out as what you put in. Faith taught me the same about leadership. So I'd love you to take us through that faith journey, please.
Sure. So when I started my career, I'm, I was raised to respect that there is a God, and I always believed that there was a higher power. But in my career journey, personally, I did find more spiritual growth. So that was kind of in concurrent to my career trajectory. I was growing spiritually, and through many different references and through people I've met all my life, I just kept being called into Christianity. And one day I went to a service with my friend at Easter, and it just sparked that spiritual growth again. And so I started reading the Bible, and it gave me so much peace and just grounding, especially being in that fast tech environment where you're just constantly launching new products, new technologies are coming. It's very fast paced. So it just helped me stay very rooted, and it just blossomed into a beautiful faith journey. So I was baptized, and I am Christian, and I continue to go to church every weekend, and am deeply involved with the faith. So it's given me a whole different system of grounding, but also values that I can really anchor in on. And I think, there are cultures at companies, right? And then you have your personal values. And I think when you can have those things kind of align, it really brings out the best in you, and it brings out the best in your team, because as a leader, we're leading teams, and if we show up with um, kind of disarray in our lives, or mentally we're not there, or spiritually we're feeling very drained, the team senses that, and you also come across differently, right? So because of this journey, I've just grown so much in that aspect that it comes across differently in me. And I can lead people from a whole different level, from overflow versus from lack. And when you just bring all of that into alignment, right? It's like the perfect collision of all the right forces, and you just move at a different pace. And so, as a faith-filled leader, I really think I'm even more empowered to lead a team. And I think it's such a great asset and not a liability in leadership.
Mm. Absolutely. And you're saying something like this in the book that you can see and tell a great leader by what they do on a Sunday. They might be helping communities, of course, time with families. What they're doing is really, really important. Your word
Mhm.
is a lamp to my feet and a light in my path. And you talk about the light. So let's have a little bit more, if that's okay, speaking about leading with light. Can I ask you for a moment? Do you happen to have this book, Power Her, with you?
I'm looking at my digital copy.
Okay, perfect. Um, yeah, so if you'd like to take us through that a little bit so that before we wrap up and as we come to a few hairy questions, leading with light, how do we do that? What should we do to do that? How do we pass the torch?
Ooh, wow. That's a really powerful question. Um, I think, for me, that grounding is faith, and people have different faiths, or people use different things to ground themselves. Whatever that thing is, it's important to include that in your life, because, I had a very good manager one time say, your order of priorities is self, family, and then work. So that always reminded me, because early in my career, I was definitely all about work, 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 work. And I did become off balance. And when I came back to myself and grounded myself in faith, I was able to just prioritize a little bit differently, and see the world differently, and see certain situations that seemed so urgent before weren't. And the anxiety or the stress that I was feeling was gone, because I could see that perspective, right? So whatever your thing is that grounds you, make sure that it's a regular thing in your life as a leader
Mm,
because you have to be full, right, to lead others.
mm,
And if you notice that you're kind of going into like um, energy drain, take a moment to tune up and charge up. So I think that self-awareness is very important, knowing what's grounding you and then being able to show up fully every day. So when you are with people, show up there, right? In
yeah.
terms of leading in person or even on a Zoom. Um, I'm guilty of it too. We tend to multitask and we have to be present more and more because we have so much information coming at us. Now we have AI tools and things are happening in the background and you have like 10 AI agents working for you. It's just so many things, right? And we have social media. So I think it emphasizes that human connection even more. So being a light is being present. It's being full yourself, being present, engaging with somebody, and tuning into how people are feeling. So when you can do that, you can say the words that need to be said, right? That'll come naturally because you're reading the situation correctly, or listen to what people are saying. Sometimes I just sit and listen in meetings. I'll say nothing and I just listen. And it usually happens when people are stressed out. There's always somebody that has to say something in those moments. Just let the person speak. And sometimes that's all they need, and the problem is solved. So I think being able to have that discernment is important, and reading the room is important as a leader. And when you're full, you can show up at the right capacity to do that.
I love that. I often say your presence in the present matters. I think more
That's
than
really good.
anything, and even if companies are they're working for the future, but when they're in the present and they're solving issues now, it looks after the next 3 to 5 generations. So if we're
Mm.
looking at our products, what are they doing? How can we make them better? How can they be more sustainable for now? That will look after our future. So instead of sitting future focused all the time, being really present with what we're doing will make the difference. Um,
Wow, that's really good. Yeah.
I like that. And you've got, so I share this with you as we run this Olympic leadership race together, because it is, right? And, we never stop learning, which is fantastic. There's 3 tips that you've given them. Learn the vocabulary because knowledge gives you confidence. So these are really important. If you're listening to this on the podcast, write it down later or perhaps grab the book and highlight it. Learn the vocabulary. So important. I've always said this, and I think it is king. Speak the language because communication builds connection. No matter who we're speaking to, whether it's our children, our husbands, we've got to learn their language. And I love learning the love languages of the people that I'm close to as well. Stay grounded in who you are because authenticity sustains your light when the world dims it. And we know that many times we can feel dimmed. Um, but it is a feeling. It may not necessarily be true. That's up to us. I would love to read this from the book. You lead from the overflow of who you are. Isn't that amazing? You lead from the overflow of who you are. Every meeting you walk into, every problem you solve, every team you guide, you have the chance to be someone's first experience of light in leadership. That's what the world needs right now. Be a light. Because leadership isn't a performance, it's reflection. And we have had reflection come up quite a few times during our time here together in the book. And I do believe it is one of the best leadership tools we all have, and it's free. I
Mhm.
love to reflect on what went well, what didn't go so well, what could I do better, how could I solve something that perhaps was a domino effect from me, the words I chose perhaps to use. The world teaches us to chase money, power, and visibility, but we do not follow the ways of the world. In fact, and this is what we are talking about a moment ago, the most powerful leaders I've seen are on Sundays. Often invisible, their influence woven quietly through the communities they've lifted, and the lives they've touched. So I absolutely love this. And as we're coming close to the end, I would like to ask you, is there anything else that you would like the audience, our listeners, to know before I get into your roll the dice question?
Hmm. Um, I think one thing I like to say is that, no matter where you're placed there intentionally. So, barring any um toxic work cultures or things like that, but you can make a difference where you're at. And I think sometimes we get into maybe like a cadence at a job we're at for a while or in an industry we've been in for a while and kind of just go through the motions. But if we just take a moment to pause and reflect and think about where we are and the sphere of influence we have, we can actually make so much more impact just through that, just standing where we already are. And that's what I'd like people to kind of remember, that we can be the change, right? There's this quote, I think it's be the change you wish to see in the world. And I think our world needs that. We need leaders who can hold space for people where they're at, but also encourage people to keep being that for other people, right? So it's kind of a domino effect and again, a ripple, but in a good way. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that. It's not always about being a thought leader. It might be about being more of a thoughtful leader. You know, what
Yeah.
what do we need? So thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your chapter. It's absolutely incredible. So much knowledge. If you'd love to reach out to Apoorva, please, in the book there is a QR code and contacts to get in touch. You were telling me at the very beginning that it's been a great journey being part of the book. Could you just elaborate a little on that?
Sure. Yeah. So, going back to reflection, I actually think this moment to join this book was perfect because it gave me an opportunity to really think about my own impact and what I want to carry forward. And writing this chapter really helped me reflect on that. But also, there's so many incredible women in the book that I am just so touched by their stories, and it just definitely leaves me empowered. And it's such an honor to bring all of this together into a book where people can really share real stories. I mean, the things that are said in the book are real moments that we face, and it's so comforting to know that we're not the only ones. So I think it's just incredible to be a part of this book and the journey.
Thank you, and thank you for coming on this journey with us. So, are you ready for the roll of a dice and the question that
Yes,
goes with it?
sure.
All right, let's have a look. What number did you get? Three.
3. Oh,
Three.
perfect.
All right. The cost of growth. Yes, because your chapter's 12, which is one and two is three. So here we go. The cost of growth. What did becoming the woman you are today cost you? And was it worth it?
Ooh, okay. Well, speaking of being real, um, being in these roles, especially so early, I've definitely had moments where friends have fallen up, away because I'm just so busy, or I couldn't keep up with relationships because I was traveling every other month to the other side of the world. And so I've definitely had to learn from those experiences and know what my call is and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Um, and then the right people do show up. I have a very great support network now that I've built over time, and I think it took some moments of, learning to get there. But the other thing too is that when you are leading people, you are an example. So you have to show up that way everywhere. So it comes across in social media, it comes across in the chapters that I write outside of work, right? So I have to keep a certain appearance or show up a certain way because I am a leader. And not that I'm doing it as a facade, but it just really keeps me accountable to making sure I show up that way.
Mm.
So I think that's something you kind of feel like um, there's a standard you have to keep. And I think it's good because it keeps you at that level and it keeps you moving forward. So yeah, I think those are some things that I've definitely grown in, the relationships, people that understand my calling and where I'm at and what I'm trying to do in the world, supporting that, but also knowing that I have to be moving forward and constantly growing to meet this level as well.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And there is always a cost. Don't forget that, everyone. What you focus on grows. So,
Mm,
if you're focusing on work and business, then, or careers, that will grow. But what is the cost? So we're always in a little bit of a juggle, and I believe in integration. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I have. And I think I would love you to read your last page, which is 132 from to the woman reading this now. I think this would be a really nice place to end. So if you'd like to take that away.
sure. Yep. So remember, you were not chosen by accident. You were planted with intention. You were always enough, but you need to equip yourself. Learn the words, be bold, but never forget the source of your voice. Leading with light isn't about having all the answers. It's about believing that even in the unknown, you are guided.
How incredible. And just before we do wrap, because I asked this question, I'd love the listeners to hear, because your name is very unusual and beautiful. Apoorva Rastogi. Can you let me know the meaning of your name?
Sure. So my grandmother picked it, and in my family on my father's side, I was the first female born in many generations, and my name means unique or never been seen before. So definitely holding um, some family pride, I guess, to lead my family forward as well.
That's incredible. I just got goosebumps. Never been seen before, because so many of these generations have never seen a little girl be born into it. So how absolutely special and wonderful. And I'm sure you were very favored. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our listeners today. Stay tuned, because our next author will be up with the next chapter. And boy, what a great session we've had. Speak soon.